The silence of mountains broke with a single shot. Then another. A line of American paratroopers, just 14 men strong, walked a narrow go trail in Nuristan province, Afghan soldiers at their side. It was November 9th, 2007. The air was cold, the terrain unforgiving, a canyon pressing close on all sides. Suddenly, the world erupted. Taliban fighters opened fire from 3 directions at once. Machine guns chattered from the ridgeline above. RPGs screamed across the sky, slamming into rocks that burst like grenades. Dust filled the air. Shouts of contact echoed through the canyon as soldiers scrambled for cover that wasn't there. Men fell. Some wounded, some killed instantly. Blood on stone. Staff Sergeant Kyle White hit the ground, his radio in one hand, his rifle in the other. Around him, chaos consumed the platoon. This was not a skirmish. It was a planned execution, a Taliban ambush designed to annihilate an entire American platoon. And for the next endless hours, survival would hang by the thinnest of threads. By late 2007, Afghanistan was boiling over. The Taliban, once scattered, had regrouped. They used the rugged terrain of eastern Afghanistan, especially Nuristan province, as a fortress. Nuristan is unlike most of Afghanistan. Remote, mountainous, and heavily forested, it is a land of steep valleys and tight passes. For centuries, outsiders who ventured here rarely returned. The Soviets had learned this the hard way in the 1980s. Now American forces face the same unforgiving battlefield. The U.S. strategy relied on partnering with the Afghan National Army, building local security, and denying the Taliban safe havens. Small American units were tasked with patrolling these valleys, showing presence, building trust, and deterring enemy activity. It was dangerous work. The Taliban studied patrol routes. They used local sympathizers to track movements. When the opportunity arose, they struck hard. On November 9, 2007, one such patrol moved through Nuristan. A 14-man platoon from the 173rd Airborne Brigade combat team, accompanied by Afghan allies. Their mission seemed routine: escort Afghan soldiers, establish a presence, gather intelligence. What they didn't know was that the Taliban were waiting with a trap. The patrol wound through a narrow canyon near Aranas village. High ridges pressed down from both sides. The Americans had little room to maneuver, visibility was limited, and escape routes were non-existent. It was perfect ground for an ambush. At approximately 4 p.m., the first shot cracked. Then, within seconds, the Taliban unleashed a 3-pronged attack. From the ridge above, heavy PPM machine guns opened up, pinning the Americans in the canyon below. From the opposite side, more gunmen fired rifles and RPGs. Behind them, another Taliban element cut off retreat. The patrol was trapped in a classic L-shaped ambush. Bullets ricocheted off stone walls, kicking up dust. Men scrambled for cover behind rocks the size of backpacks. RPG blasts sent shards of metal whistling through the air. Private Chris McKay, one of the paratroopers, later recalled the moment. There was nothing we could do but fight. Within minutes, the platoon was in pieces. Several Afghan soldiers fell early in the assault. U.S. casualties mounted. Sergeant Philip Doc Box, the platoon's medic, sprinted through gunfire to reach the wounded. He dragged men to cover, treating injuries as rounds cracked inches overhead. Then he was hit. Fatally, Staff Sergeant Ryan Fritchie, leading from the front, was also killed as he tried to rally his men. The weight of command fell on the survivors, on Kyle White and others who refused to yield. Pinned down, outnumbered, and bleeding, the platoon did what paratroopers are trained to do: return fire, call for help, and hold ground. Staff Sergeant Kyle White was everywhere at once. He dragged wounded men to cover. He grabbed the radio, coordinating artillery strikes and calling in air support. Even as bullets struck around him, he remained calm, precise, professional. Beside him, Sergeant Matthew Phillips laid down suppressive fire. Others rotated rifles, conserving ammunition. The Afghan allies who remained fought bravely, refusing to abandon the Americans despite mounting losses. For hours, the valley echoed with the thunder of battle. Artillery shells crashed down on Taliban positions. Air support screamed in overhead, strafing the ridges. But each strike was followed by silence, and then the Taliban firing again. At one point, White sprinted into the open, exposing himself to retrieve a radio from a fallen comrade. He dragged it back under fire, using it to adjust artillery onto enemy strongholds. Over and over, he moved between the wounded, applying tourniquets, giving morphine, whispering encouragement. He was hit by shrapnel and concussed by blasts, but never stopped. As night fell, the platoon was still trapped. Ammunition was low. Wounded soldiers groaned in the darkness. Taliban gunfire continued sporadically, testing their will. Finally, hours after the ambush began, aircraft cleared a landing zone under fire. Evacuation could begin. One by one, the wounded were loaded onto helicopters. The dead, too, were carried out. The survivors, exhausted and bloodied, climbed aboard last, leaving behind a canyon littered with spent brass and shattered stone. The battle had lasted just a few hours, but for those who lived it, it felt like a lifetime. The cost was devastating. 6 American soldiers killed, 8 wounded. Afghan allies, several killed and injured. The Taliban's ambush had nearly annihilated a U.S. platoon, but they had not broken them. The survivors' courage under fire became legend. Staff Sergeant Kyle J. White's actions that day, dragging wounded soldiers, coordinating artillery, and refusing to quit despite his own injuries, would later be recognized with the Medal of Honor, the nation's highest award for valor. He became one of only a handful of Afghanistan War veterans to receive it. Others, too, were decorated for bravery. Bronze Stars, Purple Hearts, the memory of their brothers lost etched forever in their lives. The battle in Nuristan was not the last ambush. The war would rage on for more than a decade. More valleys, more firefights, more sacrifice. But November 9, 2007 stands out as a stark reminder of the cost of patrols into hostile ground, of the fragility of life in combat, and of the extraordinary resilience of a handful of men who refused to give in when surrounded by death. They were 14 Americans in a kill zone, cut off, outnumbered, nearly destroyed, and yet they endured.